Just the doctor said almost everything we talked about tonight, we're going to go in more detail as the year goes on. One of the things that maybe you get is that the body is truly amazing. And it's just, we were designed and we ate certain foods, we exercised, we moved for years and years. And so we don't have deficiency of medication. We don't have deficiency. And it's not that we don't need it sometime. And do we have our markers up here? So we have three big principles of health in that. One is how we think affects our health, and we know that. How we eat affects our health, and how we move affects our health. There's times we might need a medication for a crisis, but we need to have a pre-medication plan, a post-medication plan. It's not meant to be on long term. I don't care if it's depression or high blood pressure or cholesterol medication. They will have consequences we don't want. And our body is crazy smart. So when our blood pressure goes up, it's reading that there's something crazy going on. Like there's a polar bear standing next to me because my blood pressure raises because my body says I need to get blood to the smallest parts of my body because I either have to run really fast, I have to fight really well, or I have to just curl up and play dead. But I have to do one of those, and that means I need to shut my body down. And so everything we do, and I think the interesting thing is if we look at foods, and I'll just stop at that for a little bit, I could go with all of you and say, do we know that we should eat more fruits and vegetables and healthy meats and less grains, sugars, and things with chemicals in? And everybody say, yeah, I agree. But what's the mismatch? I mean, we have more information at our fingertips. So if I go into the store and I grab a box of Hamburger Helper, could I not just Google it and see? And when I look at it and there's 20 ingredients that I as a chemist don't even know what they are, but I still, yeah, that's not so good. So it's not that we don't typically know how to eat, and we're going to, as the year goes on, talk more and more about, so what is simple eating? So I'm going to give just the ABCs of eating. The Mediterranean diet, if I knew nothing else, go with the Mediterranean diet. There's not there's not a fruit, vegetable, or healthy meat, meaning non-processed meat, that we can't do better with. So when someone in the doctors will laugh, because almost every time I do a talk on nutrition, somebody will raise their hand and ask me, but I heard there's sugar in carrots. And I just honestly want to go up there and put them in that head and put nuggets on their head, because it's like, you didn't ask me about Ho-Hos or Twinkies or a million other things, but people get confused and it just paralyzes them. So take the confusion away. If you wanted to look at one diet that's the most researched, the most health, used the most places in the world and does well, it's the Mediterranean diet. It's super, super, super easy. You just follow that. Don't worry about it. And there's no diet that you can follow for a short period of time that makes you lose weight that's going to be good for you. There's some people that love the keto diet, and we see patients in here, they lost 100 pounds in a keto diet. Really cool. They gained 120 back. Not so cool. I mean, you cannot do that for a long period of time. And can you eat grapefruit? Did we hear about the grapefruit diet? Yeah, eat grapefruit for 6 months. You'll lose weight. But you won't stop. You won't eat grapefruit for the rest of your life. You'll gain weight back again. And I think the other thing is that if there's any weight you've been at for more than 6 months, your body wants to stay at that weight. And so it will take 3 months of healthy eating often before you lose weight healthily. And so what do we use to measure our health? Again, I'm eating better and I haven't lost a pound. I hear that all the time. I'm eating better and I haven't lost a pound. So what's your why? Am I eating better to be healthy, or am I eating better to lose weight? Because it better be you're eating better to be healthy. Because that's the only thing there is to eat to be healthier than that. So we're going to talk, and we'll spend a whole hour just talking about eating and things. But part of eating is that if we do not change our habits, and last time we had some laugh and giggles around here, so I actually talked to a researcher from Carnegie Mellon this morning, and I'll talk some fascinating stuff. His name is Gerard Meyer. He has 2 PhDs, and he's come up with some analytics. One of his PhDs in analytics, the predictability of if somebody's going to change their behavior or not. The other one is in psychology. What a great combination. But he said, and Dr. Aaron said, I think 60,000 thoughts we have in that. He said we have 45,000 thoughts. That Lexi has 1,000,000 thoughts, and we talked about that last time. And so we kind of teased and kidded about that. But in those 45,000 thoughts, 80% of them are the same thought we had the day before. 80% of them are the habit we did before. And if we're not willing to change how we think, we're not willing to change how we behave. We also know that when we're under stress, we all drop into an ADHD. We all drop into making poor decisions about survival, not good decisions. So if I'm stressed and I'm shopping in the grocery store, I make worse decisions. We know that. If I go to a restaurant and I'm stressed, I make worse decisions. So where does the behavior come in as far as our thinking? If I don't change my thinking, I don't change my resources. If I don't change my resources, I don't change my behavior. Because again, we had more time during COVID, but what did we tease a little bit? The COVID-15, the COVID-25, we gained weight. We became less active. We became more depressed. So again, time wasn't the issue, but we thought worse. We had less. The head of the Gallup Institute says the predictor of health is our social relationships, and without social relationships, in the largest study ever done at Harvard, 75 years, they took a group of people 75 years ago, and they were of every ethnic background, every economic class, every diversity they could, and they followed them for 75 years. 3 sets of researchers had to follow it in that. The number one predictor of health was your social contacts. Nothing better. So thinking well is social contacts. Remembering, we're going to do a whole section on thinking well. If any of you want to get a head start, just think ahead of time on that. We'll talk about the values in action. We'll send you the link. You can fill it out about how you can come up with a thinking well plan. And then moving. Do any of us at all think moving isn't good for us? I mean, do any of us at all? And yet we move less than we ever have. Dr. Gerard this morning, when we were talking about it, he said, this is absolutely one of the starting points, is that a brain that's not moving cannot think well, period. Not at all. So we were designed over hundreds and hundreds of years. The average person moves 6 to 12 miles a day. When Dr. Aaron talks about liver detox, Dr. Matt talked about moving. Every chemical in my body, there's something called a half-life. So how long estrogen stays in my body, how long cortisol stays in my body, has a half-life. And that half-life is absolutely determined by my movement. So one of the scary things, so if it, Dr. Lexi, I think, said that there's 80,000 chemicals that we can be exposed to as human beings. Only 20% of them have been tested for their effect on human beings. Of the 20% that have been tested, 80% are estrogen-like or estrogen receptor enhancers. Number one killer of females is estrogen-type abnormalities. Uterine cancer, cervix cancer, breast cancer. Abnormalities of it. We have fertility rates at a rate we've never ever seen before as far as it goes. So think of 80,000 chemicals, 20% of those have been researched. Of those 20%, 80% have effect on a female's estrogen system and a male's estrogen system as far as it goes. Devastation. Our sperm counts right now, and right today, 50 years ago, the average male sperm count was considered sterile 50 years ago. Like, we have done things that are just absolutely crazy as far as it goes. So half-lives of chemicals. So we're all excited about the Packers, in the next round in that, which is wonderful in that. One of the saddest statistics that there possibly could be out there is more women at any time are abused after a football, men watch football games, than any other time. So we have chemicals released when we watch a football game that are only meant to be released when we're moving. And so we watch a screen, we get worked up, we start yelling at the screen. I love, there's a commercial out there where a little girl says, "Mommy, does Daddy really think the TV can hear?" We're yelling and hollering and jumping them down. And the more cortisol, the more stress chemicals go, we pass a point of civility. And a super nice person here gets over here and does horrendous things. And even though we hear those horrendous things and we say, whoa, we can't imagine it, we've all got to the point where we've said something we wish we wouldn't have said. We've done a behavior we wish we wouldn't have did. And that's when these chemicals stay in our body too long, and they're only meant to be there, and our motion plays the biggest role. Our liver can't function without movement. And we are so inactive, it's just crazy. So if we want to have kids have less depression, we have to have more movement. If we want to have adults have less depression, we have to have more movement. They did 2 major studies in France, and when we put a person on a walking program for 6 weeks, or they had mild depression, we put them on an antidepressant, they did better on a walking program than mild depression on an antidepressant. But 6 months later, they still had a carryover, even though they stopped walking, that was positive for the brain than they did from the antidepressant stopping it. So there was no carryover in that. So our body is so crazy smart. So everything that goes in our body, it has a movement parameter. It's going to last so long. And if we want to help our liver not be so sluggish, we have to move. But we can detox all day long, and if we don't have a movement plan, we're just not going to do well as far as it goes. Movement as far as, so other things it does. So in my joints, they have mechanoreceptors, so it tells me where I am. Huge word called stereognosis, space and time orientation. My body needs to be stressed on space and time orientation all the time. One of the things that we should be all doing in that, and if we wanted to embarrass even us doctors in that, if you stand on one foot and you do it for 60 seconds, you test how often you touch your foot on the floor. Then you do the other one, you test how long you put your foot on the floor. Now you put your foot up and you close your eyes. And if the difference with your eyes closed and your eyes open is great, and you test your foot touches more, we should all be able to close our eyes and not touch the ground for 3 minutes. And if we touch the ground more than 5 or 6 times with our eyes closed in 60 seconds, that's one of the predictors of senile dementia, one of the predictors of brain dysfunction, because balance is a massive part of it. Will it show up tomorrow? No, it may show up in 40 years, but it's huge. When we do young kids, I've been at this for 30 years now, and we've done sports development programs. 30 years ago, when we had kids stand on one foot, they were rock solid. Stand on one foot, rock solid. Close their eyes, just a few kids would touch. 100% of the kids now, when you tell them to close their eye, it's just unbelievable how absolutely they cannot do it anymore. So do we wonder why kids we have more kids taking antidepressants than we ever could imagine? Kids are not going to live as long as their parents for the first time ever in history as far as it goes. We're 5% of the world's population. We take 80% of the antidepressants and 80% of the painkillers in the world. Like, those numbers are astronomical. But again, we're undermoving. We're eating foods that don't help us detox. We're not learning how to think in proper ways as far as what we're trying to do. So again, we're going to spend the rest of our time that we're with you together in that. I'm going to jump just a little bit on, because obviously COVID's have been huge, and I just don't think we can talk about it enough. We went to a program today in industry, and we talked to them. The curiosity was massive as far as it goes. So if we think about what we aren't doing well here, and we think about what I heard today from a researcher, one of the top in the world, that we know that we can be healthier if we do these. I'm just going to ask, so of people that died from COVID, how many of them had no health condition? That was measured. What was the percentage of all the deaths in the country that died of COVID? 6%. 6% had no other health condition of that. So if I say 400,000 people died and I take 6%, you mathematicians like Dr. Aaron and that, well, for every 100,000, we're looking at of 100,000, we're looking at less than 35,000 people dying. If we were healthy, would COVID be a whole different issue? Because we're not healthy, COVID is a much different issue. And that, so if there's ever a time we should think about it. The other thing we hear about, and I'm going to come back to COVID a little bit more, that we hear about having health care for all, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful potential in that. But we spend 24% of our gross national product for health care. So when you have a country like Greece that has universal health care, guess what they spend on health care? Their total cost for their country of their gross national product, which is way smaller than ours. Crazy smaller per person earning. Theirs is 4%. Could we raise taxes by 4% and absorb that and probably be okay and have universal health care for everybody? But can you raise taxes 24% and have universal health care for everybody? And we spend the most of the world per capita and the most dollar amount in the world, and we're the unhealthiest nation in the world in almost every measurement. Our kids, almost every health measurement, we measure below third world countries as far as survival rates and most things. We have more cancer. So we can't spend our way, and I don't know if there's anything out there that's ever been more in our face than COVID, because we had to stop the young from interacting because we had so many vulnerable people in this country. Because there's no state out there, say people under 19 had almost no risk whatsoever. Those that were older and those with comorbidities absolutely had a risk, and it can be devastating. And almost everybody might know somebody that died from this. But seldom do they not die with some other massive condition going on. The average person dying from COVID has 3 other health conditions: diabetes, obesity, liver failure. And what did Dr. Aaron talk about? 100,000 people, 100 million people, one third of the population has livers that are toxic because of the foods and the things that we eat. If you have ever had somebody in your family that's died of an alcoholism, what happens? They drink and they get more and more of what Dr. Aaron talked, aldehydes. So when you drink when you're young, you might get to the point where you black out, and we know we're in trouble. Then you start to drink older and you get longer to recover. Then you drink when you get older and you start to be skinny and lose your muscles all over, but you have this huge stomach in that. Then as you get older, you start to drink and you start to have really signs of alcohol poisoning. You don't have to drink anymore, but now yet your liver is destroyed at phase 2 and phase 3. When you drink, you develop aldehydes and they destroy your liver at a faster rate. And it's the saddest thing in the world to see that when that happens. So now we have livers that are already toxic because, I mean, can you possibly imagine that we take the blood from a baby that's just born and we draw it out and we find 300 toxins in it? I mean, isn't that absolutely unimaginable? Like, when we talk about all the things we want to change in the world, changing what we put in our body would have more of an effect, because healthy people, and the doc from Carnegie Mellon, and why they're coming up with things to say, okay, we're going to look at 7 types of procrastination, and we're going to look at what's the reason that you don't engage in taking care of yourself, and then we're going to teach you how to have a new skill set about procrastination and why you have that. So there's not just one. Procrastination isn't knowing I should do something. We have perfection procrastination, we have time procrastination, we have self-fulfillment procrastination. We have 7 types of procrastination. So they've come up with an analytical tool to say, let's analyze it, let's see what it is, and let's teach you new tools. Because do we really not know we should move? Do we really not know we should eat better? Do we really not know that we should say nice things to people than bad things? I mean, does anybody, I mean, we have a funny little thing in our wall there that said, you know, that the internet has never made the deaf hear, but the internet have certainly made the dumb talk. I mean, we just, like, what is the purpose of somebody thinking different of you and screaming and yelling at them? Like, how could that possibly make any sense whatsoever? So do we know that we should treat people kind? I mean, if I said in the room, should we be nice to everybody? Should we thank you? Should we hold doors for people? Should we be tolerant of all differences? Should we be? None of us would not raise our hand. But how many times do we exercise when someone's different than us that we get mad at them? Somebody cuts us off in traffic and we give them the number 1 sign. And it's like, really? Like, that's so important that it's worth getting mad, it's worth doing something with? I mean, there's a great saying that says, when I get angry, it's like taking poison expecting it to affect the other person. We need to somehow become more resilient than that. So in our bodies, when we think better, when we eat better, when we move better, we have 2 parts of our nervous system, or 2 parts that I'm going to talk about: parasympathetic and sympathetic. Parasympathetic is heal and repair. Sympathetic is flight, fight, or freeze. Dr. Lexi talked about it, Dr. Aaron talked about it, Dr. Matt talked a little bit about the purpose of exercise and in detoxing. We should be 80% parasympathetic, 20% sympathetic in our day. What do you think the average person is in the United States? Just reversed, 80% sympathetic. We're like the polar bears there all the time, and we don't repair ourselves. And every study on stress shows we have more cancer, we have more abuse. Saddest thing, we had several years ago, I had a patient come in and said she was just distraught, and 2 40-year-olds that were living together, and one 40-year-old male hit the 40-year-old female so hard that she developed a bleed and tore the coating around her brain, and she's the function of a 5-year-old, and she will be for the rest of her life. Who would ever get up in the morning and think they were going to do that? Who would plan on doing that? But if we live here, sympathetic, We get pushed to the edge and we do horrible things. And we do horrible things. And we yell at people. We get mad in the shopping cart. We get mad at somebody. We go up to somebody that is different than us, health-wise, whatever, and we do horrible things. But if we live here, we're very more likely to be here. If we're a parent and we live in that's parasympathetic, we can truly look at our kids and talk to them. When we live in a sympathetic, when we're in a sympathetic, what do we get addicted to? Absolutely crazy. Cell phones. And how many kids don't see their parents' eyes at the dinner table because they're on their cell phone? I was driving to